document. So next on your resume, as we go back to our Prezi, is a skills section. And that skills section, and a lot of times students want to limit to computer skills, but it really can be a variety of things, as I indicated on your worksheet. They should be field relevant, but are not only other computer programs. It should only contain hard skills. So this is not a place to list things like leadership or communication or anything like that. It should be tangible, hard skills that you've developed in through your experiences, either computer programs, hand skills, if you have, as this resume we're working on in Word has some experience in construction. Sometimes students include lab skills or coursework in this section as well. So maybe it's lab skills through chemistry lab or something like that. And you'll see that on some of the examples as well. So as we go through our document here, typically as we flip back and continue to work off of our resume worksheet, we're going to add a skills section or a section heading, and we're going to make that 14 point and bold. Typically, a skills section is best delayed in a comma delineated fashion. So putting our skills in line and separating with a comma. So here I'm going to say AutoCAD. We're always going to start with our most specialized skills first. So if you're listing computer skills, for example, and you want to include Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Excel, those are skills that can be included on your resume, but they should not be listed first. Those most specialized skills should be listed first. So as you see here, I'm going to list some of those design programs. You probably haven't been exposed to all of those quite yet, but think about any sort of specialized programs. Maybe you've worked with Photoshop. Maybe you have worked with, maybe you worked with some design programs in high school, things like that. So thinking from that way, I'm going to speak to this computer skills that I gained from the summer experience here a little bit. And then I'm going to say Microsoft Office. Microsoft. So that fits nicely on one line, and then that's in a comma delineated fashion here. I could also add in this section maybe home repair and renovation, as that is a hobby that I participated in. And so if I do that, I will add one more, and that'll go on a second line in that way. And if I do that, maybe I want to call this skills and hobbies. I'm also, if you see this spacing in between these two lines is a little bit larger than what you normally see. So if you go to your paragraph menu, you can just double check that and make sure your spacing is set to 0 in single to make sure that that text is as close together as it should be. So again, letting your content determine your format. So hobbies can sometimes be included as skills if it makes sense, if they are relevant. Watching NBA basketball is probably not a hobby that we want to include on our resume, but home repair is a bit more relevant to our engineering interests. Okay? So next we are going to continue on with the bottom portion of our resume. The bottom portion of the resume are very flexible from both a title and an order perspective. In this example, the writer has a separate leadership section because he had some significant leadership experience. Some of you may have significant activity from high school or maybe not much at all, so you want to combine things into one section. Maybe that section is called activities and awards. Maybe it makes sense to have one activities and leadership section and you add your awards to your education section. We'll take a look at some of these different formats. In any format, you will want to include the organization name, probably a time frame of your involvement. That might be including the year, that might be noting high school. Typically, we want to include some type of time frame, but not always. You might want to include a title or your noted achievements, but this area of your resume is really where you need to think about the message you want your information to convey and make some intentional decisions. You want to make sure that you know why you put things on your resume and what order they're in. You also want to make sure that anything you add to this portion of your resume is something that you're comfortable talking about in an interview. The worst situation is when a student puts an activity or an award on their resume, and then I ask them about it, and they say, "Well, I don't really do much with that organization anymore," and so that doesn't really convey a strong message. So I'm going to start by looking at my resume worksheet and thinking that maybe I want one section that's called activities and volunteer opportunities. And I saw one of the formats that separates high school, college, and community, and I'm going to try to do that because in what I have written down maybe makes sense. So because I have a lot of activities from high school and I feel like I have a lot of community service stuff. So that might make some sense to get things on my resume in that way. So I'm thinking that I want 3 lines here. Oops, before I do that, I'm going to add yet some more. You see that we're now on the second page. At the end of the day, we're going to have a 1-page resume, but to maybe get there, sometimes it takes starting with getting the information on the page and then formatting it down. So we have activities and volunteer opportunities. And like I said, we typically want to work in reverse chronological order. So I'm going to do college and then I'm going to do high school. And I think I have some information for community as well. So I'm going to start there. And I'm going to start here. I was Young Life volunteer, Young Life leader, music director for Young Life, and a church volunteer. So I did all of that in high school, but it wasn't necessarily tied to my high school. So I think that makes sense for community. In high school, I was involved in the Technology Student Association. I was in the National Honor Society. Maybe I want to include that as an award or honor. Well, how about if I include it here? Because I did community service with that. And that's pretty much what I did in high school because I was usually working. And since I've been at UC, I don't know that I've been in a learning community. I haven't really gotten involved in things. So that seems to be my activities section. Not sure how I feel about that, but let's get it on the page and look at it there. And then I think I should have an awards and scholarships section based on what I have on my page. So again, we're going to get our headers there. And I think it's important for you to kind of go through and hear some of the rationale behind this information because sometimes it seems so straightforward when you look at a finished resume as to how and maybe I wonder if it makes sense to continue the same format. I think it's important for you to see that things aren't straightforward, especially in this part of your resume that, you might have to work through some different changes and different ways that we do this. So I'm thinking that I put scholarships as college awards. you're going to list Cincinnatus, you should list the level of scholarship as well. Many of our employers are familiar with the banding of the scholarship, so make sure you list that. And then for high school awards, I'm thinking that, let's see, I have National Honor Society on here already. I graduated with summa cum laude honors. I wonder, maybe we'll try to put that here. And let's see, I think everything else is already on my resume. When we work on this section, we want to make sure that we don't duplicate things. So if I put on graduation honors down here, I don't put it up here. However, as I look through this section, it maybe isn't giving the impression that we want. So we have all of this community activities down here, but we haven't really done much at the college level. And then the same with awards. We have this high school graduation honor, which is great, but it's kind of by itself. So I'm wondering, and if you remember on our education page, we talked about kind of this rule of 3 or more. So if you have 3 or less honors or awards, you might be able to put them in your education section. But if you have more and you want a separate section, that might make sense. So for example here, we have 2 scholarships, we have these graduation honors, and then National Honor Society, which could be an honor or an activity depending on the school that you went to. To put all of that in the education section might be too much. But if I put the Latin honors up there and move the rest to its own section, it might look more reasonable. So when this is what we talk about with Latin honors. I wonder if it would make sense to add that here. If we insert a row and add our Latin honors here and italicize that, so we move our GPA back up 1 line. All right, so now we have that information on there. And what if instead of delineating by college and high school, we simply say Cincinnatus Scholarship, Farm Bureau Scholarship? What if we say National Honor Society and awards and scholarships? And what if we just call this, well, we can call it, what if we call it scholarships and honors? And then if we look at our activities section, activities and volunteer opportunities, what if we just call it activities? And since our high school, we've already put National Honor Society down below. We don't really feel in this student's case, maybe we don't feel super strongly about having our BME learning community on there. What if we delete our community piece and then we say, and we add Technology Student Association down here. So by not separating things, we're not calling out the discrepancy in the amount of involvement that we've had in high school versus college. So we have activities and we have Young Life Volunteer, Music Director. I'm going to say Crossroads Church Volunteer, and then Technology Student Association. So that's a little bit more vague and sort of helps us out in that regard. So it takes a little bit. You might work through this. You might also spend quite a bit of time on this part of your resume as you do on the education part. But again, it's about letting the information you have dictate your format. Make sure you want that the information is displayed in a way that you're happy with, but also that you're not listing anything twice. So you saw as I move things around that I didn't list things in 2 areas. So you want to make sure that you're happy with the information displayed and that you're not being redundant in any way. So the last piece of information that goes on our resume you see down here is availability, and then there's this references line. So you can add availability at the top or bottom of your resume, and this simply states to the reader when you are available for a co-op position. For the purpose of this class, you can list fall or spring, fall 2016 or spring 2017 for your first co-op semester as your availability, if you are uncertain of your actual availability. But this is really specific to a co-op resume and is really helpful for our employers as they're reading through several student resumes. So here, it can be added to the top or the bottom of your resume. I tend to have a preference to putting it kind of as a footnote at the bottom. So I kind of want to center it here, and I'm going to say co-op availability, or maybe I'll say available fall 2016 or spring 2017 for first co-op semester. So maybe I feel like that, and I might italicize that at the bottom of the page. So it could be that simple. You'll see, you might list if you have one specific semester that you're available for, you might list the dates of that semester. That can be really helpful to our employers and can ensure that you know the dates of those semesters as well. But that gets us to all of the components of our resume. This reference is available upon request line here. It's completely optional. I'm not a stickler for it. It's pretty well implied at this point that if you need to provide references, that you're going to be able to do that. So if you're struggling to get that on the page, then we can simply remove it. So that takes us through our adding all of this information to our resume. And now that we look at our Word document, we clearly have more than one page. And at this point, for a co-op resume, you certainly should have all of your information on one page. So we're going to take a look at how we might be able to reduce that down to one page and then get these lines out of here, because we've never seen a resume with all those lines on it from our table. One of the first things I'm going to do is reduce the font size of our contact information just down to 11 so that our name stands out a little bit further. The font that I'm using here actually takes up quite a bit of space. So what if I go, and just to see, sometimes you can see if we switch to Calibri, what the difference is. All of a sudden we only have a few lines to work. We have 4 lines to get on a second page versus this Avenir, which gave us several more lines to work with on the next page. So it might be changing the font that you're working with. We can check out Helvetica is another popular sans serif font as well. So we see that that cuts us down quite a bit. We'll continue to work in Helvetica just because that's easy for us. But so we see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines that we still need to get on this page. One of the next things I'm going to do actually is reduce the top and bottom margins just slightly. I'm just going to go down to a 0.8 margin, which might help us a little bit. Yeah, in that regard. I'm not sure that we're centered on the page all the way here, and we can come back to that. But since we changed the margins after we put our table on there. So we just have a few lines to get on our one page. So I want to again go through and make sure we're not wasting any space. We've done a pretty good job throughout making sure we don't have any single lines with one word on them. But here all of a sudden in our new format, we have summers 2013 and 2014 is now on a second line. And we're kind of teasing around with this. So here's where maybe we extend our table just a little bit. There we go. We got that. And so now the only thing we're left with is our availability that has to get on that page yet. So that's we're doing pretty good actually. And again, I'm ignoring the fact that we have more white space on the right side of the page than the left. That is something that if you set your margins before you add your table, you won't have that problem, but I did things in slightly the wrong order here. So one of the last things I'm going to do, and this isn't always the best option or the next option, but can serve you well in the future. We want to keep this white space as much as possible because it makes it easier to read your resume. But what I'm going to do is highlight each of those rows and simply reduce the font size. We're going to go from 12 point to 8 point in those lines. And so that's going to keep the white space there, but it's going to make it slightly smaller. 8 might be too small for what we're doing. We might be able to get away with 10 here because we're just trying to add that one more, sneak that one more line on the page. But this is a good trick that you will continue to use. As you see, we got that on the page already, but we want to be consistent in the size of our white space. So that's a kind of pro tip in putting your resume together, to keep that white space but to resize your font. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete this row because we don't need it. And that deletes that last page. And then you might be thinking, I've never seen a resume with all those lines on it. Our next step is to go ahead and delete our borders. So we're going to just go ahead and look at our table and say no borders. We're still here viewing the grid lines, which is a view option. So if we take that off, we can see what our whole resume looks like on one page in Microsoft Word. So that is pretty straightforward and a pretty solid document that you're looking at. I just want to show you a couple of more features in using a table that you might want to do. One thing that a table allows you to do, if you want to create some horizontal lines of separation, I'm going to turn those grid lines back on. So for example, you probably see some examples that use horizontal lines to separate sections. You can do this by using different borders. So if we're going to simply add a bottom border to the row of our header, and if we turn those grid lines off, there now we have that line on our document. So that's pretty easy to do. And again, you might see that in different ways throughout your in different examples. Or we're going to undo that. You might see an example where they add a underline at the top of each section. Maybe that's something that you want to do. And so you can do that pretty easily as well by using the functionality of the table to simply add that underline as a border. So I've seen students struggle quite a bit to try to get those horizontal lines on their resume. Using a table can be a really easy way to give it a shot and try it out with a few clicks, and then to see whether or not it's something you want to keep or to remove. Again, to do it with a couple of clicks as a table border is maybe a lot easier than adding it other ways. So as we look at it that way, maybe that's how we are happy with the end of our resume there. One other thing that you can do with a table that is really great to be able to do is to be able to add fonts of different sizes on the same line. So I'm going to do this even though our document looks to be complete. So for example, let's see if I'm going to add a line in here. So I'm just going to work, for example, if I needed more space on my resume, one thing I could do is add my name to this same line here in my header, right? So we could have this all in the same line, except now, if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see that that creates this weird spacing situation because your name is in one font and your address is in another. So one thing you can do, if we center our name in that cell, is highlight the cell, and simply align that in the bottom left. And we can align this information in the bottom right. Here we go. And then it's all seated on the same line. If we zoom out, if we zoom out and remove those grid lines, it looks great because this information, it reads straight all the way across. Whereas if you're not using a table, you end up with those gaps on your information on your left and right. So that's another feature of a table where you can include different font sizes on one line and give the same spacing. That is super helpful. and something that you might be able to do or you might want to use when you're creating yours. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that and get us back to where we started. And so, like I said, we remove the grid lines from the table. This is a critical step. You may have been thinking all along, well, I've never seen a resume with all those lines on it. Make sure you remove all of the format, you remove all of your borders before you submit your resume. But think about the features of a table and how you can use them to achieve the look or alignment that you want. There are certainly many more possibilities and assets than the ones that I've talked about today, but those are the ones that I use most frequently when creating a resume. When creating a co-op resume to give us this look. And again, I like it because it allows us to create alignments really easily. Looks like we forgot to italicize our title right here. There we go. It's always about those details. So make sure you give your resume another look, that you have all of your details, all of your spelling is correct, and things like that. So as we wrap things up here, your next step is to obviously save your document as a Word file. That's pretty straightforward. One tip I'm going to have is that you save your file with your name in it. And so I'm going to do last name, first name, and then maybe the word resume. Keep in mind, if you're sending or uploading your resume with that file name for anything, it's everybody is going to just call it resume. So put your name in your file name to help whoever is receiving. And again, when you upload, your file name will be available as well. So you're going to want to save it as a Word document so that you have it for the future, and that you can continue to edit that document. And then our very last step is going to be to save it as a PDF. When you send your resume to anyone, you want to, or post it to anything, you want it to be a PDF document, because a PDF will open the same on any computer and you will retain your formatting. So we're going to go ahead and save that as a PDF. Then our very last step is going to be to find that back. Hopefully I saved it where I thought I saved it. We're going to open that PDF and make sure it looks exactly how we want and that there's not a blank second page. And that PDF is then going to be what we're going to upload to Blackboard for our assignment or what we're going to use in the future. So once you've confirmed that your PDF is in final form, upload and submit it for this assignment. That should take you through all the steps of creating a resume. Thanks for sticking with me through this video. I know it was a bit long, but hopefully you found it helpful and an easy way to kind of go between the content of that presentation, your resume worksheet, and your and the information that you have. Your full resume is due to be uploaded by next week on Blackboard and should be uploaded as a PDF. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks for listening.